Hello, and welcome to the Football Influence, a show where we bring you exclusive insights and stories from the world of football as viewed by professionals within the industry. My name's Hashim. This episode might get a bit confusing because there's more than one Hashim in it today. He goes by on social media as Physio Hash. Many of you guys may know him. So it's a real pleasure to be bringing on Hashim. I've got my co-host, as usual, Louis, today. How are you, mate?
All good, thanks. Yeah, very happy to be back, and it's going to be a great one today.
Perfect. And Hashim, how's everything with you?
Yeah, good, thank you. A little bit tired from the late troubles from the game last night, but other than that, overall, doing well. Thank you very much for asking.
Good, man. It's good. So how's it feeling with the season overall been for you personally and for the team so far?
Yeah, so for me personally, a challenging one in personal development. I think there's a lot of new challenges that you see when you step up from an academy environment into a first team environment. Obviously, the level of detail, the pressure that's involved, the travel and the politics that are actually involved within teams, but then also going from a leadership position to a position where actually, and in a very, very good way, you are the dumbest in the room. And so you go from being almost the teacher to the student all over again, which is something that needs a little bit of getting used to, but is massively beneficial on a developmental side. And then in terms of the team, I think doing extremely well. I think superseded where anyone predicted us to be at the beginning of the season, given the circumstances, given the embargo, and to be competing for a playoff position and to have performed as well as we have performed is kudos to the squad, kudos to the team behind the team, kudos to the gaffer who's coming to English football and it's his first season in it. So it's massive hats off to everyone that's involved.
Yeah, and obviously we'll dive into the specifics of how your roles evolved in the last year or so and how that's impacted you in your personal life. But yeah, great to hear also. And I mean, for a club like Hull City's size, seeing what you've been doing this season is obviously very encouraging for the future. And great to hear it from you. And I think that's a good way to get it going. Also to trace it back. So looking at the early days for you, obviously coming through that educational journey when it came to wanting to be a physio, and how did that actually start with you? What was your motivation growing up? And probably as a football fan, I'm guessing, but especially wanting to go into the medical side and kind of balancing it out with football. How did that originally start?
Yeah, so, as common with a lot of kids wanting to become a footballer, and quite quick to realize that my ambitions of becoming a footballer were probably, the ceiling of it was probably like step 7, realistically. So had to find other avenues to be involved in the sport that I loved, but at the same time, helping everyone around you. To be completely honest, when I was going into university, I had done a work experience in a hospital with one of my relatives and sort of doing ward rounds and bits like that. And I did love it. I loved to follow a consultant doctor around and see all of that side. Genuinely did love it. But my grades were never really up there to be pursuing that. And that's absolutely fine. Like, I don't look back at that and say, I should have done this or I should have done that at all. Not for a second, because I look at where I am at the moment and all praise to God, I feel like I have a job that might be a lot of people's dream job. Or I get to have experiences that are a lot of people's dream experiences. So, the fact that the grades weren't up there to do that meant that basically I was looking at other options. And I think a lot of people, when they want to go for medicine, for example, and they don't have the grades to do it, they look at substitutes like biomed or pharmacy, etc., etc. And I think that one that just definitely wasn't looked at enough for me was physiotherapy. I just felt like it was such an overlooked study and such an overlooked field. And I think part of the reason for that might be what the average wage is, because I remember when I was trying to pick what I wanted to do for university, seeing the salary is a massive influence on what you decide. But I knew that I didn't want to do something that was very heavily essay based or anything like that. I knew that I wanted to do something that was really hands on. I know that I'm a very practical learner. I know that I don't want to be sat at a desk for the whole day. And I think that plus the passion for football sort of easily merged the two in my mind. So it was quite an easy decision, if I'm completely honest with you, to go down the physiotherapy route with the goal in mind of working in sport.
Mm. So obviously, look, you're in the industry now, and the thing is, I know that first step is always the most difficult. Like you're saying, you wanted to be a footballer at early stages, but then realized that, I've got to just do what I'm really good at. And that's, in the studying fields that I went through in order to get into football. But some people really struggle to envision a way to actually break in because it just seems like such a closed off industry. So for you, being able to land Colchester as the first job, what was your idea when you first graduated from uni? What were you thinking?
Yeah, so look, I'll be honest again, I was really, really lucky to experience some of the things that I experienced while I was studying. So as part of our studies, if you're studying a lot of healthcare fields, you have to go and do placements and clinical hours because studying it in theory is so different to what you see in real life. So they make you go out and experience it. So as part of it, you had to do 1,000 clinical hours and it was split over 5 different placements. And I was lucky enough that my middle placement, I was offered to go to Stevenage under a very, very good physio, to be fair. And I think that you'll get these moments in your life, whether it be in your studies or in your career or even on a emotional front, where you sort of come across something and it just clicks and it just feels like that's what was destined for you, and you feels like everything is just so perfectly matched. And that's exactly what it was. I had 6 weeks at Stevenage and I enjoyed every single second of it. That was back when they were in League Two. And from that, it was just building connections, really. Built a really good connection with the physio that was there at the time. Built a good connection with some of the players that were there at the time. And essentially at that point, which was sort of halfway through my degree, I knew this is exactly where I want to be. Gives a lot of motivation to go through the bits that aren't necessarily related to what you want to do, but you push through them because you know it's necessary to get to where you want to get to. So anyway, got through all of that and finished exams and finished university, etc., etc. And then as soon as I finished my last exam, I called the physio that was my educator at Stevenage, and I said to him, "This is exactly where I'm at, and I've just finished, and I'm expecting this grade. So, is there any opportunity to work part time with you? Is there any opportunity to do anything with the team? You know me, you've seen how I work, and I want to learn more with you." And at the time, the opportunity wasn't really available, and so you almost come to a split road and you have to decide. And the route is that you can either guarantee yourself a role quite early because now your financial backing's gone. So you want to get yourself a job to have some money, or it's patience, basically. And at the time I had a part-time job anyway, which I suppose alleviated some of the pressure. But I knew that if I went into anything other than the sports sector, it will be difficult for me to then leave that to re-enter the sports sector. So it was really, really crystal clear. I didn't apply for anything that wasn't sports. I never looked at it. My only applications were for football. I was applying for everything that I was coming across, basically, even if I was nowhere near the requirements, but I was happy to move out. I remember at the time I applied for Aberdeen, obviously Colchester, applying for some clubs that were abroad, because all you want to do, as you said, you're so right, because it's so difficult to get your foot in the door. All you want to do is just get your foot in the door anywhere, and then you learn a lot more from those who have been through the whole process already before you. So It's absolutely fine feeling like you need to progress yourself outside of it before you go into it. But actually, it's almost like you need to jump into the deep end and learn how to swim while you're there.
Yeah, I think that resonates a lot, and something that we can understand also, being a similar age profile, understanding the patience that it requires. And from your perspective, how did it feel, especially when you got that breakthrough and when essentially someone trusted you for that role and for what you wanted to bring in? Having had the experience, but also, having a young profile, which in football can be a bit challenging at times. So how did that feel when someone, I guess, finally trusted you?
Yeah, look, it's an emotional roller coaster, and the career will always continue to be an emotional roller coaster. Um, and that's for really simple reasons. Obviously, when you graduate with a good grade and you've been in and around football before, and people have sung your praises, you sort of go into an environment and you're thinking, okay, well, I deserve to be here and I know what I'm doing, but you never do. There's always people that are more experienced. There's always more detail. There's always new research coming out. There's always new methods. Um, Plus, add on to all of that, no two injuries are ever the same because no two people are ever the same. So
Yeah.
you're always needing to adapt what you're delivering. And I think that was the start of the roller coaster for me, that you go in at such a high because you feel like you deserve to be there and you've done so well for yourself and they trust you. But then really quickly you realize actually you don't know as much as you think you know. And
Mm.
so you sort of start to come back down and lose confidence, and you need to build that. And then it's just a continuous sort of cycle of you lose the confidence and you gain a bit of knowledge, and then your confidence comes back up. And
Mm.
then you enter a new environment or you come across something new and your confidence comes back down because you feel like you're the student again. But the important thing across all of it, and probably one piece of advice that I would give to a lot of people, is that it's really important to understand exactly where you are. And it's not a bad thing to have less knowledge or more knowledge. I think what's more important is just to understand exactly where you are. So you go through these cycles of basically being incompetently incompetent, where you don't know that much, but you don't realize that you don't know that much. So you come across as a big time character, which I was definitely at one point in my career, and probably a lot of people behind my back and some people to my face telling me that I'm miles off it. But it's part of the journey of going through that and being incompetently incompetent. And then you start to realize I don't know too much. And then you're competently incompetent. And then you start to learn a little bit more, but you don't really trust yourself. And then you're sort of reaching that peak. And then it's just this ongoing cycle that carries through.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, obviously, we break down Colchester firstly. Um, you went through multiple different levels and multiple different jobs. So again, this balance that you're talking about, you experienced it in every single one of the roles you had basically at the club.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
every new role you get, I'm assuming as well, you obviously get even new tasks, new delegations, and then you again have to balance how much do I know, how much do I need to learn, how much can I actually
Yeah.
showcase that I know so I can keep growing in the industry. So obviously starting off as a academy physio and then going all the way up to becoming head of medical. What was the transition like, the different roles for you? Like, was it tough to adapt?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Probably the toughest challenge I've had in my career so far. Um, I think that you go in when you're going in as an academy physio or under 18s physio. I think you're a new graduate, but a lot of people understand that. A lot of people understand that you're new. A lot of people understand that there's a lot to adapt to. It's a completely new environment. It is not like any other workplace whatsoever. And then you sort of earn some trust and you pick up a lot of successes along the way. But then there's a lot of luck involved, and there's a lot of decisions that other people make that are nowhere near your hands or anything that you've done. But sometimes they go in your favor, and that was certainly the way in my case, where staff members left and you have to fill in. And there's no other option. We can't just bring someone up to do the role out of nowhere. And at that point, you've got two options. It's sink or swim, and your reputation relies on it. Your reputation within the club, and ultimately your reputation everywhere else. Because, as you both know, football is a very, very, very small community.
Mhm.
The network within it is so tight knit. Everybody knows everyone, and reputation goes a very, very long way. So when I went up to that, there was no other staff member, and we were covering pretty much everything. When I done the head of medical on an interim basis, it was exactly the same. And I think a lot of people missed that there wasn't a mentor as such. There wasn't anybody higher than me. So if I was doing something incorrectly, I wouldn't have necessarily known that I was doing it incorrectly. Being so fresh out of university and without that leadership role ahead of me, it was, I think, at that point more about keeping the ship together rather than trying to streamline it. And also, yes, it's a League Two club, but there are players who play for this club who have played at the top level. Players who have played at the World Cup, players who have featured in the Championship or in the Premier League before, or at the most prestigious clubs. And suddenly you're having to look after them medically or to rehabilitate them when they've been used to top level professionals with years and years of experience. Of course, in their minds, they're going to compare you and your knowledge to what they've had previously. Of course they are.
Yeah.
So that's its own pressure as well. So yeah, 1,000,000% it is very, very difficult. I am extremely grateful for it. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity the coaches they gave me. And then when their head of medical, Hayden Clifton, came in after that, it was a really, really, really tight knit team, and it became a really good developing environment, and we built up really, really well from there.
And I mean, it really speaks to your resilience as you've put it there. I mean, I think that being thrown in the deep end, as you say, and having all these tasks and obviously having to learn on the job, which I think is a very underrated skill within football. I think especially when it goes to medical, I think, you have to be in control of what you know, but there is also so much you don't yet know, and you have to kind of learn on the trot. So I think, that really speaks to that dedication, and you can really tell, because obviously the bounce up after that was your current role, which is with Hull City, obviously first team physio. And I think that it seems that, you took that journey and really made it your own, and it got you to where you are now. So how did obviously that transition happen, having had the experience before? How did it really materialize for you when you moved out from Colchester?
I mean, look, you guys have never done a podcast before, have you?
No, this is obviously the first one, like first 4 episodes.
So you guys never knew how to do a podcast before it. You went and you delved into the research and you tried to find out what equipment do I need to buy, what platform do I need to use, who do I need to get in touch with, and you probably know more now on your 4th episode than you did on the 1st episode, don't you?
Yeah.
But that's fine. That's part of the journey, and you're gonna know more on the 8th episode, and then your 10th episode. It's fine. It's like you're not gonna look back at your 1st episode and go, "Oh, I wish I never done that because it's so bad." Or it's like you're just gonna look back and realize the progress that you've made, and I suppose that's exactly the message to anyone who's out there who wants to get into any sporting role. You just need to get into it and trust that you're going to learn a lot. And you need to trust that I have my way of working personally. My colleague might have his way of working, and another colleague might have his way of working. But when I see from them things that I like and I add them onto my way, and I see things that I don't like and I decide not to add it, and then you see more and more people work around you, and you just pick the things that you like, the things that you think that are effective, whether it's communication methods or whether it's how they organize their time or how efficient they are, or discuss things, or their bedside manner, or their knowledge about it, whatever it is. You pull all of these things together, and ultimately, even though you're pulling it from other people, the blend is unique to you. So you're still getting your unique blend of your way of working. And I think that that's probably exactly what the key to it is. You just need to understand that you're always a student to the game. And the game, just like the tactics on the pitch, the game is always evolving. The medical field is always evolving. There's always new things coming out. And so I think that was a major part of when I was looking to move out of Colchester, because I knew that the head of medical that was there at the time was going to be there for a little bit. And so at that point, I needed a next step to develop myself further. And so I went on to be the head of academy at Hull City, which is, obviously a bigger club than Colchester, albeit the academies are actually the exact same level. But it meant I had exposure to different practitioners who had a lot more experience playing at a higher division with more pressures. And that was brilliant. We had a year of basically continuous development for every single member of staff, which developed knowledge massively. And then thankfully that got us to a point where the director of medical at the time was happy with myself, I suppose, and decided to provide me the opportunity to work within the first team environment. And I'm very, very happy to say at the moment I am gladly the dumbest person in the room, because I've just gone back to being a student again, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, that's great. And on a technical level, obviously, without going too deep into it, but how different have the demands been, obviously, because you mentioned different divisions as we're aware, but it's also a different role. And as you also point out, it's a different culture within the club, and especially within that medical section, it's probably that case as well. So how different have the demands been, especially at the level?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've realized this season is that everything that's textbook isn't really textbook.
Yeah.
The amount of adaptability that's needed is insane. Ultimately, the biggest difference between the academy and the first team is the first team need 3 points. That's the be all and end all. And you want your strongest 11 to be on the pitch for as long as possible, while ensuring that they're going to be on the pitch for as long as possible for the rest of the season, if that makes sense. So I think that that's been the biggest difference so far. And I think being in a playoff push just adds to that even further, because everything's on the line. So the textbook stuff just isn't really textbook. Your foundations stay the same, but adaptability is needed to understand exactly what's needed for that player to come back at a certain time. And there's a lot of communication that's needed, because the player needs to be happy with the process as well. And if he's not, then there's not much you can do about it. At the end of the day, it's his body that we're pushing. 9 times out of 10 they are, because they want to push and they want to play. So that's definitely been the biggest thing this season.
Yeah. Thing is, Hash, you're quite a social guy. You don't struggle in communicating with players, different age groups, all that sort of thing. Now, obviously, mental fatigue is another big thing for players, and I'm sure some of them that get recurring injuries probably will get a bit sick of seeing your face every time they have to come in to do their
Even
rehab.
the ones that don't get injuries, to be fair, they get sick and tired of seeing my face.
Yeah. So physios in clubs, sometimes players see them more than most other members of staff, to be honest, at clubs.
Yeah.
So how do you establish a close connection with players? Have you found that side kind of easy to the job?
Yeah, I think look, we're lucky enough to have a few members of staff in the team, and I think that you need to go in understanding. Like, for example, you've just said I'm really social. Not everyone in that team is gonna like me. I'm not gonna be everyone's cup of tea. There's gonna be people that I can get a lot closer to, and there's gonna be people that I probably have a lot less in common with. So we're lucky enough to have different members of the team, and the different members of the team will all have their different strengths and weaknesses, and they all have their different backgrounds and experiences and bits like that. And you naturally gravitate anyway to those that you share a lot more in common with. And to have 26 players in a squad and 4 physios, you're still getting 8 players share between you, 7 players, 8 players, 6 players, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
So you'll naturally gravitate to players that you share a bit more in common with, or you come from similar areas. For example, I'm the only one in that team that's fully born and bred in London. So any players who are from London, just naturally we find that we sort of gravitate a little bit more towards each other, because we come from a similar place.
Yeah.
And it could be the same thing with ethnic groups or faith, for example. But after you see a player for a decent amount of time, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks plus, regardless, you end up building a bit of a bond with them, because it's not just strictly talking about their injury. You end up talking about, what's going on behind the scenes, what yellow flags do they have, what's going on with their family, what kind of stresses are building up. And you can almost become a little bit of a sounding board, and they can sound these things to you because they see you so much. So you end up building a relationship through that anyway.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch upon a segment that you just mentioned there, the fact that obviously there are multiple team members, which makes sense, especially at a high level in the championship, but also at club level in general. And I can speak from experience as well. I mean, I like working in a team. And I think that's really a big part of what we do in football, depending on different roles. And I think that for you, it's probably the most valuable thing. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. Has that been a factor that's really helped you with, as you say, the differences between, the different physios or the different medical people? Has that been a real positive for you, obviously coming into a new culture, as we said, and adapting to that club?
1,000,000%. Yeah. I've definitely worked with people who have developed me in so many ways, whether it be personal or educational. You're gonna see these guys more than you see a lot of people in your family. You travel away together. We spend so much time doing the same job together that we inevitably bounce ideas off each other and sometimes try and fend for each other if as a department. So it is a huge, huge thing. I actually think it's the most important thing. I definitely know it's the most important thing in my role. It's probably the most important thing in a lot of roles, that the team that you're a part of, you need to feel like you are properly a part of it. And I've worked in some teams that are better than others. I've worked in some teams where the relationship is not just purely focused on work. And look, we're lucky enough to be in a football club where you can do loads of different things. We're lucky enough to work in a place where there's a lot of people that know a lot of people. We have access to football pitches, we have access to footballs, we have access to X, Y, and Z centers or paddle courts or gyms or whatever that might be. So it's always actually quite easy to plan the social side of things, and that obviously just lets your hair down and helps you get along with everyone more as friends rather than as colleagues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, Hash, you're the first medical guy we brought onto the pod. We obviously thought, who's the best guy we're going to bring on to talk about the most prevalent topics
You
in the
thought,
world of...
who's the only guy that would just be free on a Wednesday evening?
No, I know it couldn't be further away from the truth. But so, like, for example, there's big topics right now in the world of football, like the current load on players, and the scheduling issues that multiple different people have spoken about in the industry. So do you think, to a certain extent, player welfare is currently being compromised? Because we obviously know, and you obviously know, ideal recovery times in between matches probably like 72 hours or in and around that time period. And obviously a lot of the elite teams, and especially at your level championship, with the amount of games that are getting played, maybe 48 hours at times or even less. So how does that compromise the player welfare in this case?
It's a difficult question, and I'll tell you why. Because your body will adapt to load, but it needs a constant stimulus of that load to be able to adapt to it. So if you do it as a one-off, you're not going to adapt. But for example, say you're a Man City and you have your players there that are playing consistently at the top level throughout all of these matches that they have: Premier League, FA Cup, Carabao Cup, Champions League, Club World Cup, and then you have the international breaks and they play through that. And then if you have a tournament in the summer, then they play through that. So realistically, there are some players that could, if they were available, play the whole year through. And then you have to sort of ask yourself, as much as we're saying about compromising player welfare, which is a massive, massive question mark, of course it is, but you have to also ask, if there are players that can do it, then it's almost a little bit of your survival of the fittest, isn't it? Because you want to have the best players at that level, and your best players are the ones that are the most consistent. So if you're having consistency in those players at that schedule, then surely this means that this player is built to tolerate it. And so it adds market value to him because of his robustness, for example. But obviously, the other side to it is that some teams this season have had 4 games in 8 days, which is ridiculous. And so, yes, it adds a lot of strain onto the players, but then there's a reason why teams have a 26-man squad. Because if you had a backroom staff that clocked on to things like this, then they would rotate your squad and they would allow for different minutes. And thankfully for us in our medical department, we have a backroom staff that is really helpful in managing minutes. And we're obviously just playing in the championship with nothing else to play for now. Yes, you have the League Cup and the FA Cup to start off the season, but at the moment it's just obviously the championship. But still, regardless, when a player comes back from injury, for example, you still have to manage manage minutes or manage loading or manage when they're actually able to return to game time. All of it is about taking risk, and all of it is about trying to calculate the risk and trying to weigh whether it's worth taking it or not worth taking it, depending on where you are in the league and depending on what the next game is. It's so individually dependent that it's so difficult to answer the question, because the answer for any two players, it'll be different. That being said, from the player welfare side of things, we see more involvement in it today than we ever have seen before, whether it be from a psychologist's point of view or the PFA, for example. So they have access to these resources, because forget like loading for a second, like forget how much you run in a game. You get pelters from the fans. You can easily get pelters from the fans for 90 minutes. And then after the 90 minutes, you can go onto your social media and you can be exposed to all sorts. That can do a lot. That can do a lot of damage. So it's important for these players to have access to that. But then you can also see inside the squad, you can see the effect that it has sometimes. You can see the aftermath that it has on certain players' mentalities or certain players' performances or certain players' attitudes. You can see those who have built thicker skin to it. You can see those who are a lot more sensitive to it. And I think that's a big part of the player welfare discussion, because 30 years ago, you're not going on Twitter and reading all the comments about your game. You can't. So that side of it is completely non-existent. Now you go onto Twitter straight after your game, and you everyone who owns a dog is just basically saying, why didn't he run down the wing? But actually they might not know anything about football anyway. But you don't know that, right? And it's so easy to get affected by it and not take it with a pinch of salt. So yeah, it's a massive discussion, and we can go on for days and days about it.
Yeah. Would you say one of the benefits is therefore the development of sports science and innovation within football and within recovery systems for players? Because, well, the negatives are the load on the players. Some players just don't have, levels of fitness that other players can have at different levels. But would you say that is one of the benefits that these sports science departments that obviously you work in tandem with have really been developing as much as possible in recent years?
Yeah, 100%. Look, the demands of the sport are increasing with the tactics changing the way that they are. And as a medical and performance department, if you like, you need to make sure that your team is able to tolerate any of the demands that football throws at it. And that's where a lot of different things come in, whether it be in the gym or on the pitch. Look, even training, as much as we train and try to simulate all of these different match day scenarios, nothing is the same as a game, right? So your simplest examples, any loading in the gym, pick any exercise for your hamstring is not going to load your hamstring anywhere near how much it needs to be loaded for a sprint. It will load it, yeah, it will, 100%, right? But the amount of loading that actually goes through it relative to body weight is nowhere near what will go through it when it's going through a sprint. So the research suggests that the more you sprint, actually, the less likely you're going to injure your hamstring. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of things that, yes, they help and they work, but you find that players who play the most, them playing builds them being robust, because nothing is quite the same. As much as we do rehab on the pitch, and we might try to hit certain GPS metrics that we calculate based off what their match day metrics are, or what their maximum metrics are, or what their weekly metrics are. As much as we do all of that, still nothing ever replicates what it's like in a game, because in a game, you have so many extra stimuli of thinking about what the opposition is doing, thinking about where your man is, thinking about where the ball's going to drop to next. You're always trying to stay a step ahead, whereas realistically, in a training session, you know what the drill is. So there's always an added layer to a game, plus the pressures, plus the fans, plus X, Y, and Z. Yes, the sports science and the medical department and the performance department, yes, they want to try and bridge the gap as much as possible. And there's always new things coming out about how we're bridging the gap, and there's always new research coming out about how much exposure is beneficial or what new exercises, but there's nothing quite like playing the game.
Yeah. And talking about playing the game, academy football probably has seen a huge rise over the last 4 years in terms of level that teams are playing at, in terms of, how players are being managed at such an early age, and, how they're given now first team opportunities at even younger ages than before. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, we never imagined a 15, 16-year-old making a first team debut. It would have been unheard of. But now we're seeing more and more of these cases arising. Obviously, you've worked at academy level, and I don't know how many major injuries you've seen at young ages, but how tough is it for clubs and for people responsible within the clubs, such as people in your roles? How tough is it to manage and increase the long-term projection of players from a young age when they're faced with sort of such high-intensity games at even younger ages now, and meet potentially injuries as well?
So look, when I first went into academy football, I'll be completely honest. I didn't know that there was such thing as under eights. I didn't know
Yes.
that. I didn't know that existed. I don't know whether it is just me that wasn't exposed to it or what it was, but I didn't know that that was a thing. But you go into these academies and you have under eights all the way through to under 21s. And generally what we find is that the younger age groups, like we're talking under eights to under 12s, you're not really seeing much drama. Also, it's because at that age, they're not really massively trying to build a tactical understanding. At the end of the day, these are young kids. We're trying to get them to enjoy football and basically just build the simplest basics, right, as a foundation
Yep.
for the next step. So that phase was literally called the foundation phase. And then as they grow older, so you're coming into your sort of 12 to 15 really, and these players start to go through all these hormonal changes and they go through puberty, but they're playing more and they start to become involved not just in the academy, but they'll be involved in like their school team, and they'll be involved in the district team, and they'll be involved in athletics and basketball and everything under the sun, because that's what the most athletic kids will do because they enjoy it, and their body isn't quite mature enough to handle it, or the amount of stress that they're putting on it is probably a little bit too much for their skeletal maturity. And sort of things start to have a bit of an imbalance, and that's when you start to see a lot of growth related injuries where the growth plate in your bones isn't quite fused yet, and there's constant pulling forces that can actually be really painful. And you'll see so many players now on a professional level, if you ask them about these injuries, if you ask them about Oscar's slatters or severs or these growth related injuries, they'll all know exactly what you're talking about because they had to adapt to these demands. And then even at that point, at those ages, that's when you might start to see a bit more of the sort of more dramatic injuries. Like you might see 1 or 2 leg breaks at that age. I think like 1 or 2 meniscal injuries. Really rare to see at ACL. But
Yeah.
your body's still developing. Your body's still essentially, this is not scientific, by the way, whatsoever. I was about to say your body's still basically made of rubber. It's not actually made of rubber, by the way, but just saying.
Good to clarify.
Yeah, important.
But it is, and that all of that loading that you do at that point builds a lot of resilience for you for later on. And then you sort of start to get to your 16 plus, so you're under 16s, you're under 18s, you're under 21s, and suddenly people are looking at you and they're thinking whether you deserve a professional contract or not. They're thinking whether you deserve a scholar or not. They're thinking whether you deserve opportunities to train with the first team or not when they need an extra player. And then the pressure obviously skyrockets and the intensity of the game skyrockets. So that's when you start to see a lot more of the actual real life injuries. Players' bodies start to get closer to skeletal maturity, and you're putting a lot more load and intensity through them. Like, for example, when you're 15 and you have your evening sessions, for example, with your squad, when you turn 16, you're suddenly exposed to a lot of clubs, what they'll call day release. So essentially you miss a day of school and you come in to train for a full day and you'll have 2 sessions in the day. But this is already an extra load that you've had just because you're a year older, and your body needs to adapt to that extra load, right? And the more you play, the more risk there is of something happening. That's natural because you might be subject to a tackle or you might just fatigue one muscle a bit too much. So there's always going to be elevated risk with the increase of intensity of the game. with
Yeah.
the increase of the importance of the game. Because, for example, like in a friendly, no one's crunching into tackles. You're in a playoff push, everything matters. I've done my ankle, but I'm still carrying on because the playoff push is more important. So all of these factors obviously come into play, to account for what injuries you see at what ages.
Yeah, and I think it's very timely because, as Hash was pointing out, first Hash, the fact that obviously
First Hash. Crazy.
the fact that obviously yeah, the load is increased on youth players younger and younger, and I wanted to also get your opinion on this because I've been exposed to obviously youth football quite a bit with the FA here and the French Federation, to see it obviously firsthand, and obviously nowhere near medical. I'm not a medical person, but having talked to physios and people within the medical space as well, and having had a look at that also to see what it involved also, because you see 15-year-old players, as you say, sometimes making debuts, but especially playing up, for national teams especially. So 15-year-olds playing for under 19s, etc. And I also wanted to get your opinion on, so obviously the relative age effect, which is so advantage that players have over like maturity, depending on when they're born. That's more of a technical with their birth date. But what impact does that also have on the natural development of players? Because it seems like it really does hinder that as well at times. And I also wanted to get your point of view on this.
So look, biological age is something that we do take into consideration, because everyone, although their birthdays might allow them to fall into a certain age category, biologically there's nothing that any of us can do to change their rate of development or to change when they hit puberty. There are players who will hit puberty at 13. There are players who will hit puberty at 17. That's a 4-year gap, which in footballing terms, you both know, is huge. So for that reason, there are younger players who are biologically just a little bit ahead. And so it gives them an edge straight away, because naturally you'll feel like they're able to tolerate the next age up, not because of technical ability, but because of physicality, really. And there are a lot of people that are of the idea that if these genetics are there and these physical attributes are there, then we trust our ability as coaches to be able to train the technical side into them. Whereas there are people whose, for example, physical attributes are just not there to be able to tolerate the game. So regardless how much you train their technical ability, it's not going to be as good as someone who has the physical and the technical. You might have someone who doesn't have the physical, but their technical naturally is miles beyond. I mean, you look at Messi, for example, or Sanchez or Coutinho. There is always the argument, but especially more than anywhere else in the world, the English game, the physical side of the game is unprecedented. It's huge. You know how much strength you have to shield the ball, or to shrug off your player, or how much speed you have to be able to go past the last defender, or to be able to be the last man and catch your attacker is huge. They're seen as invaluable traits to the game.
So, anyone wondering why we brought on Hash as the first guest for Physio, you can tell with the level of detail in these answers, this is the reason why. And we thought,
because I was free on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, man. But a more personal thing for you now, a personal ambition. I know.
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't know, obviously you're from Iraq, and we've sat down multiple times. Obviously we both know Hassanin, who we brought on as well as a guest early on, and how much he's doing for Iraq and Iraqi football. So we've spoken about obviously potential ways to benefit Iraq and improve whatever setbacks or whatever system they have that's lacking certain areas of expertise, how we can all be able to contribute towards that. So in your field, what do you think right now, from your knowledge, are the main areas that are lacking, but especially in terms of the physiotherapy side of things? What's sort of lacking there, and what do you think you can maybe help out, contribute potentially long term?
Look, I've always said I would love and have loved every opportunity that I've had to be involved in Iraqi football. Over the last few years, I've gone out of my way and Hassanen has been there and he's seen that, and you know, we pay out of our own pockets to go and experience a lot of things. And I've gone out of my way to visit Iraq for the last 4 or 5 years in a row, specifically on this sort of journey to understand what the medical side of football is in Iraq. And in a nutshell, on a national team level, it's actually quite good. They are partnered with Aspetar, which is one of the leading sports medicine hospitals in the world, probably the leading sports medicine hospital in the world, who Aspetar partner with a lot of top surgeons and specialists and clubs. You see a lot of, for example, PSG players that go there. You see a lot of Barcelona players that go there. You see a lot of world-renowned specialists who do a lot of work with Aspetar. So on a national team level, it's actually all right. The trouble is that you're only with the national team for a short amount of time in your season.
Yeah.
Right? So these players who actually play locally in Iraq, in Indonesia, for example, which I don't know too much about, but the players who play locally don't have a lot of exposure to top-level medical specialists or top-level medical care. I think that over the last few years where I've been to Iraq, physiotherapy is something that is sort of looked down on a little bit. It has a bit of a different reputation, not just in sport, by the way, in all of its different forms, whether it be respiratory or acute or MSK, is sort of looked down upon. And if you are a physio in Iraq, a lot of people, when I would go and I would say, look, this is my background and I just want to see what your case is and I want to help you. And when I say that I'm a physio, I realized really quickly people just basically ask for a rub. Right? And so I realized really quickly there's words to use that associate different things. So actually, when you say sports medicine, it gets viewed very differently to saying physiotherapy.
Yeah.
And I think that that's number one problem at the moment, is the culture towards what physiotherapy actually is. But then look, beyond that, on a club level, there is so much to be built. Even as high as Aspetar is and as nice as Aspetar is, we are a nation full of very bright individuals. We are a nation full of people who are very proud of their nationality. We're a nation full of people who, due to the conflicts over the last 25, 45 years, have seen a lot of their population go and emigrate to other countries, but have actually picked up a lot of knowledge in these other countries and they're ready to bring it back home and serve the nation. So I think it's time that the FA needs to potentially realize where these people are so that we can rely on our own people rather than outsourcing different things to, for example, to Aspetar. Yeah, okay, there's not a lot of Iraqi physios that work in professional football, but there are. There are Iraqi physios. There are Iraqi physios who are willing to sacrifice. There are Iraqi physios who are willing to do anything to serve the national team. Similarly, there are Iraqi coaches who have worked at top levels across the world. Iraqi psychologists, Iraqi nutritionists, etc., etc. There are people that are there that have knowledge, that want to serve. Me being one of them, obviously, I would love more and more opportunity. I've had a lot of exposure, I've had a lot of opportunity, but ultimately decisions lay with only few people. And, we do everything we can to get opportunities. And there's a lot of opportunities that, if I'm completely honest, just to serve your nation, you're probably not looking to really get paid. Just look after my expenses. I just want to be there. I just want to help.
No.
But unfortunately, due to the circumstances, there's a lot of keeping everyone at arm's length because you don't know everyone's true intentions and you don't know what everyone really wants. And there's a lot of just
it's politics at
involved.
the end of the day. It's politics. Yeah.
There's a lot of politics involved, whatever it is. But look, at the end of the day, whether it's me or whether it's someone else in any field, all you can do is you can build yourself up to the highest level that you can achieve and attain, and then keep knocking on the door and hope that one day the door opens for you so that you can have the opportunity to serve your country on the pitch.
Yeah, no, for certain, man. And I think the thing is, you obviously know Iraqi football as well. At baseline level, at the end of the day, even the national team itself with the players, we had problems with, historically with expats and expats not having the same rights as obviously others in the national team. And obviously we've seen how that's transitioned and changed. So hopefully we're going towards a more positive direction in being able to rely on, everyone globally and the people that left the country for whatever circumstance it is that have gone to seek better lives and gain better experiences elsewhere, hopefully. And I'm sure, like you said, I speak to many of them, many of them, I'm sure, that work in different parts, in different industries. They just want the opportunity, to be honest. Like you said, it doesn't need to be paid. They just want to serve. They just want to help back home and everything. So I think, like you're saying, and hopefully now that we've made the World Cup as well, the eyes on Iraqi football is a lot more. And I think there's hopefully going to be more opportunities that come from that. So just got to keep knocking on the door and hopefully it happens, man.
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. I think one massive takeaway from this now that we're in the World Cup and with the funding that provides, it's a huge opportunity for Iraqi football to look at building from the ground up, from academies up to build the next 2, 3, 4 generations of Iraqi footballers. And when you're trying to build these academies, inevitably it's going to come with a lot of things that's needed alongside it. Inevitably, you're going to need more coaches, you're going to need better coaching, you're going to need a philosophy, you're going to need a medical team, you're going to need a performance team, you're going to need grounds and clubs and gyms and people to rely on if things go wrong. So I think personally that's the real next step for Iraqi football as a whole.
Yeah. And now, obviously, you've, as we said, had a crazy rise in football so far, and you're still very young, still hopefully many more things to happen. But in terms of your future aspirations and what you're looking to impact the industry, what's the goal?
I just want to win the next 2 games. Just want to win the next 2 games, man.
Yeah,
that's all I want, man. No, obviously, the lifelong dream is to work with the Iraqi national team and to be able to medically serve at the World Cup for the national team. 1,000,000%, that is by far the aspirational goal. Looking at closer and shorter term goals, I think I've still got a lot yet to learn. I think there's still a lot of development to happen. I think that there's still a lot of things that I can improve in terms of understanding and organization and getting the most out of the players that I see day to day and hopefully preventing them from stepping off the pitch with me. So I think that's my current focus at the moment. But obviously, we want to win the next 2 games. Obviously, everybody wants to work at the highest level. So yeah, it's. I think my aspirations are quite simple, really.
No, that is really inspiring to hear. And for this next segment, we always do this on our episodes. So we're going to give you 5 words or 5 questions, more or less, and you come up with the first thing that comes to mind. You can elaborate or not. Obviously, that's your choice. Do
I have to limit it to 1 word?
No, well, you can elaborate, but obviously, it's the first thing that comes to mind. It's kind of the spontaneous response. So
okay.
To kick things off, the first word for you: injuries.
Oh no, I think that's the phrase.
You got used to saying that every time a player comes with
it. Look, it's the job at the end of the day. You know, without it, I wouldn't be in a job, really. But yeah, it's good, man. Well, it's not good, obviously, but
it's part of the game.
Yeah, it's part of the game.
This one obviously is the current level, the championship.
Brutal. I genuinely think the championship is top 5 leagues in the world.
Yeah, it's a shout that a lot of people say that they've worked in it or played in it. A lot of people do say, obviously, with the level it's at, and you see how many players transition straight from the championship to do well in, as you said, in the notorious top 5 leagues as well. So yeah,
that's not a bad shout at all. To be completely honest, yeah. The next one for you is sports science.
Development word I would associate with that.
Yeah. And then this one's probably more prevalent to your taking care of the players, but peak performance.
Peak performance.
Let's say, how'd you get there? How do you know
what it is?
That's the question.
Is
How
that
do you know what
just the eternal challenge for you, is to always try and, I guess, amend to reach
Yeah,
that, essentially?
yeah, of course. Of course, when you look after a player after an injury and they hit a new top speed, or they hit a new PB, or they hit whatever it is, obviously it's a massive confidence booster for them, and also to back what you're doing to show that it's working. But ultimately, just got to keep them healthy on the pitch. That's the biggest indicator that what you've done has worked. Obviously, also, if they are on the pitch shortly after you finish working with them and they end up, getting an assist or scoring or helping the team, then that's a huge bonus as well. And I always ask them to celebrate with me, but they never do.
Yeah, fair enough. The last one is not necessarily a one-word one, because it'll probably bring up a few different ideas for you. But Iraq's qualification.
Oh, emotions, difficulty. I think we made it harder for ourselves than we needed it to be. But look, we're there now, so there's no point dwelling too much on it. It's all about looking forward to our games now and making sure that we top the group.
I think we always end it on one question, one last question before we let you go. And obviously, we asked this to people so far. I think, yeah, you're by far the youngest. To be fair, I think
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hassanen had the title before, but I'm sure he'll be quite disappointed to know you've stolen it off him. But
No.
in terms of your 18-year-old self, if you're looking at him right now in the face, what advice would you be giving him?
Apart from save your money.
It's a big thing. You could say that. Invest in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I probably would have said that. No, I would just say to him, just do what you like, follow what you like, but just follow it within your morals, and keep pushing when people tell you it's stupid, or when people tell you can't. Just trust yourself, do it, do what you want to do, back yourself in doing it. Take the leap of faith. If it doesn't work out, what's the worst that's going to happen? Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You just have to back yourself and do it.
Yeah, no, great advice, and I think we've learned a lot from this episode, definitely. And yeah, seeing as how things are going for you, and yeah, hopefully things just go from the up from here, which would be great. And no, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
Obviously,
much. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure also to look into the medical side of thing, which is probably the most important side of football, essentially. So thanks a lot for tuning into the Football Influence. As always, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and we'll see you guys in the next one.